Are you and the hunt gone? Wrong. Zareth pressed her back against the cold metal wall and tried to control her breathing. Her 4 hearts were beating too fast, pumping blue blood through her crystalline skin in a pattern that would give away her position if any devourers came close. She had been running for 3 days now, ever since the creatures had attacked her exploration team on this cursed space station. The young Veltari scout was far from home. Her people were known across the galaxy for being fast and smart. They could change their skin color to blend with almost any surface, and their forearms made them excellent climbers and fighters. But none of that seemed to matter now. She was alone, hurt, and trapped in a nightmare. Her left secondary arm hung useless at her side. 3 long gashes ran from her shoulder to her elbow, sealed with emergency biofoam that was starting to fail. The wounds throbbed with each heartbeat, and she could feel her strength leaving her body drop by drop. Zareth looked down at the energy blade in her primary right hand. The weapon hummed softly, its blue glow reflecting off the twisted metal corridors around her. She had been proud of this blade once. It was a graduation gift from her mentor, forged on the crystal forges of Veltar Prime. Now it felt heavy in her grip. The space station groaned around her, metal settling and shifting in ways that made her jump at every sound. This place had been marked as abandoned in the galactic databases. Her team was supposed to map its layout and catalog any useful technology. It should have been a simple mission for a junior exploration crew. Instead, it had become a death trap. The first sign of trouble came on day 1. They found scratch marks in the walls, deep gouges that went through military-grade hull plating like it was soft clay. Team leader Kexith had dismissed them as old battle damage. Maybe pirates had fought here or the station had been attacked during one of the border wars. But the scratches were fresh. The metal edges were still sharp, not worn down by time, and they were getting deeper as the team moved toward the station's core. Zareth remembered the moment everything went wrong. They had been exploring the main cargo bay when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in red light. That's when she heard the sound for the first time. A wet, chittering noise like insects talking to each other. The devourers came out of the ventilation shafts. She had never seen anything like them before. The creatures looked like they were made of melted metal and flesh mixed together. They had too many teeth, too many eyes and limbs that bent in directions that hurt to look at. The smallest one was the size of a ground vehicle. The largest was bigger than her team's shuttle. They moved fast, faster than anything that size should be able to move. And they were smart. When Kexith fired his plasma rifle, the creatures spread out instead of charging. When Engineer Molix tried to seal a blast door, one of them was already on the other side, waiting. Zareth had survived because she was small and fast. While her teammates fought, she ran. She told herself it was tactical. Someone had to escape and warn the fleet. But she knew the truth. She had been scared, and she had abandoned her friends. Now she was paying the price. A sound echoed through the corridor ahead of her, the wet scraping noise of claws on metal. Zareth's camouflage ability kicked in automatically, her skin shifting to match the gray-brown rust patterns on the walls. She held perfectly still and tried to quiet her breathing. One of the smaller devourers crawled into view. It was about the size of a large dog, but it moved wrong. Too fluid, like it was made of liquid instead of solid matter. Its head turned back and forth, sniffing the air. Multiple eyes glowed in the red emergency lighting. The creature had grown since the first attack. That was the most terrifying thing about these monsters. They ate metal and flesh equally, and everything they consumed made them bigger and stronger. This one had pieces of the station's hull plating growing from its back like armor. It passed by her hiding spot without stopping. Zareth waited until she couldn't hear its footsteps before moving again. She needed to reach the communications center. Her emergency beacon wasn't strong enough to reach the fleet from here, but the station's main transmitter might be. She moved through the maintenance tunnels. Space is barely big enough for a Veltari to crawl through. The Devourers were too big to follow her here, but that also meant she was trapped if they found her. Every few meters she stopped to listen for sounds of pursuit. The station's layout made no sense. Corridors led to dead ends. Rooms connected to each other in impossible ways, and some sections seemed to be slowly changing shape. Zareth began to suspect that the Devourers weren't just eating the station, they were reshaping it. After an hour of careful movement, she reached a junction where 3 maintenance shafts met. Her internal compass said the communication center should be directly above, but when she looked up through the access hatch, she saw only darkness. Zarath activated a small light on her wrist device. The beam revealed a room that had been completely consumed. The walls were covered in the same organic metal growth she had seen on the smaller devourer. Thick veins pulsed through the structure, carrying some kind of fluid that glowed faintly green. This wasn't just a nest, it was a feeding ground. She backtracked and tried another route but found the same thing. The devourers had eaten through the station's central sections and rebuilt them into something else. Whatever they weren't just monsters, they were engineers. That's when she heard the sound that made her blood freeze, a deep thrumming call that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was answered by dozens of smaller voices throughout the station. The devourers were communicating, and they were all moving toward the same location. They were hunting her. Zarath abandoned stealth and ran. Her people were built for speed, and even injured, she could move faster than most galactic species. She leaped between broken support beams, slid under collapsed barriers, and climbed up damaged walls using all 4 arms. Behind her, she could hear them coming. The wet scraping sounds multiplied as more creatures joined the hunt. They were driving her somewhere specific, cutting off escape routes and forcing her toward the station's outer sections. She burst through a damaged airlock into what had once been a cargo bay. The room was huge, big enough to hold her entire exploration ship, but there was only one way out. The other doors had been sealed with the same organic metal growth. Zarath realized she had been herded into a trap. 3 massive devourers emerged from the shadows. These weren't the small scouts that had been tracking her. These were the giants she had seen during the first attack, grown even larger over the past 3 days. The biggest one was the size of a shuttle, its body a nightmare fusion of consumed metal and alien flesh. She could see pieces of her teammates' equipment embedded in their bodies. A fragment of Kexth's armor plating, part of Mollix's tool belt. They had eaten her friends and worn the remains like trophies. Zarath raised her energy blade with her remaining good arm. Her 4 hearts were failing one by one, her body giving up from blood loss and exhaustion. But she was Veltari, and her people did not surrender. "Come on then," she whispered in her own language. "Let's finish this." The largest devourer tilted its head, studying her with too many eyes. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of teeth made from sharpened metal. It had learned to enjoy the hunt. Then it lunged forward, claws extended, ready to add her to its collection. But just as death reached for her, the far wall exploded in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Something impossible stepped through the smoke and debris, something that shouldn't exist anywhere in the galaxy. A human. Part 2. The Impossible Rescue Marcus. Chen stepped through the smoking hole in the wall and Zarath's world turned upside down. She had studied galactic history in school. Every child in the galaxy knew about humans. They were legends now, ghost stories told around campfires. The last human had died 200 years ago when their home planet was destroyed, but here one stood, very much alive. He was shorter than most galactic species, with strange pale skin and dark hair. His clothing was different too, practical work clothes instead of the flowing robes most civilized species preferred. In his hands he carried a weapon that looked ancient and crude. The devourers turned toward this new threat, confused. They had never encountered anything like him before. The largest creature let out a questioning chirp, its multiple eyes focusing on the human. Marcus raised his weapon, something Zarath's database identified as a shotgun, and fired. The sound was incredible. Not the clean hum of energy weapons, but a sharp crack that echoed through the cargo bay. The blast hit the nearest devourer's center mass and tore a hole straight through its body. Dark fluid sprayed across the floor as the creature collapsed. Zarath stared in shock. Energy weapons barely scratched these monsters. Their skin adapted to plasma and laser fire within seconds, but this primitive projectile weapon had dropped one instantly. "Stay down," Marcus said in perfect galactic standard, his voice calm despite the chaos. "This is about to get loud." The 2 remaining devourers shrieked in rage and charged. They moved like liquid nightmares, flowing across the floor faster than most beings could track. But Marcus was already moving too. He rolled to the side, avoiding the first creature's claws by inches. As it passed, he fired again. The blast caught it in what might have been a leg, spinning the monster around. Before it could recover, he had rolled again and fired a third shot into its head. The second devourer tried to flank him, using its intelligence to circle around. But Marcus seemed to know exactly where it was going. He backpedaled while firing, each shot precise and devastating. The creature's adaptive armor meant nothing against solid projectiles traveling faster than sound. Within 30 seconds, all 3 devourers lay dead. Marcus immediately dropped his weapon and ran to Zarath. She tried to raise her energy blade, but her strength was gone. Her 4 hearts were barely beating and her vision kept going dark around the edges. "Easy," the human said, kneeling beside her. "I'm here to help." He pulled a small device from his belt and ran it over her injured arm. Zarath recognized it as a medical scanner, but the design was completely unknown. It looked like it had been built from spare parts and held together with metal tape. 3 hearts in critical failure, 1 completely stopped. Marcus muttered, reading the display. "Severe blood loss, infection starting in the major wounds. You're dying, but slowly." "That's good. Gives me time to work." Zarath tried to speak, but only managed a weak whistle. Her species communicated partially through sound modulation, and she was too weak to control her vocal cords properly. "Save your strength," Marcus said. He was already pulling more equipment from various pockets and pouches. "I know what you are, Veltari, right? 4 hearts, crystalline bone structure, blood chemistry based on copper compounds. I can work with that." How did he know so much about her species? Humans had been extinct for 2 centuries. Their databases should have been lost with their homeworld. Marcus worked with swift, sure movements. He injected something into her primary bloodstream that made her feel warmer immediately. Then he began cleaning her wounds with a solution that burned but stopped the bleeding. "This is going to hurt," he warned, pulling out what looked like a welding tool. "But your people heal fast if the wounds are sealed properly." The pain was incredible, but it was clean pain, the kind that meant healing instead of dying. Marcus worked like he had done this before many times. His hands never shook and his focus never wavered, even though more devourers could arrive at any moment. As he worked, Zarath studied him. Humans were supposed to be primitive warriors who destroyed their own planet through endless fighting. But this one moved with the precision of a trained medic and the knowledge of a xenobiologist. He was also completely calm under pressure, something even her own people struggled with. "There," Marcus said, finishing the last wound seal. "Your heart should start working properly in a few minutes. The infection is stopped and you'll live long enough to reach proper medical care." He helped her sit up slowly. Zarath felt stronger already. Not good, but no longer dying. Her secondary heart had restarted, taking some of the strain off the others. "Who are you?" she managed to whisper. Marcus smiled, and it was a strange expression. Warm, but also sad. "Someone who shouldn't exist. My name is Marcus Chen, and I'm probably the last person in the galaxy you expected to meet today." "Humans are extinct," Zarath said. "That's what we wanted everyone to think." Before she could ask what he meant, a new sound echoed through the station, the chittering calls of more devourers. They had heard the gunfire and were coming to investigate. Marcus was on his feet immediately, reloading his weapon with practiced speed. "How many are there?" he asked. "Too many," Zarath said. "Dozens, maybe hundreds. They've been growing for days, eating the station and everything on it." Marcus nodded grimly. "Then we need to move." "Can you walk?" Zarath tested her legs. They were shaky but functional. "I think so." "Good. Stay close and do exactly what I say. My ship is docked on the other side of the station, but we'll have to fight our way there." He handed her a strange device. Another weapon, but smaller than his shotgun. "This is loaded with solid projectiles. Point and pull the trigger. Don't try to be fancy. These things adapt to energy patterns, but they've never seen kinetic weapons before." The chittering sounds were getting closer. Marcus moved to the hole he had blown in the wall and peered out carefully. 6 of them in the corridor," he said quietly. 2 big ones, 4 smaller scouts. They're trying to surround us." Zarath joined him at the opening. The devourers were positioning themselves at corridor junctions, cutting off potential escape routes. They had learned tactics by consuming the memories of her teammates. "They're smart," she warned. "So am I," Marcus replied. "But they've never fought humans before. That gives us an advantage." He pulled something from his belt, a small sphere that beeped softly. "Grenade," he explained, seeing her confusion. "Chemical explosive. Cover your ears." Marcus threw the sphere down the corridor. The devourers scattered, but the explosion filled the space with smoke and debris. Two of the smaller creatures shrieked in pain as metal fragments tore through their bodies. "Now!" Marcus shouted. They ran through the smoke, Marcus leading the way. The surviving devourers tried to intercept them, but the humans seemed to know exactly where they would be. He fired as he ran, each shot finding its target. One of the large creatures lunged from a side passage. Marcus dropped and rolled, coming up behind it. His shotgun roared and the monster crashed into the wall dead. Zareth fired her weapon at a smaller devourer that tried to attack from above. The projectile punched through its skull and it fell writhing to the floor. She felt a surge of satisfaction. For the first time in days, she was fighting back effectively. They reached a maintenance hatch and Marcus wrenched it open. "Down here," he said. "The main corridors are compromised, but they can't follow us through the small spaces." As they dropped into the narrow tunnel, Zareth heard more devourers arriving. They found the dead creatures and let out hunting cries that made the station walls vibrate. "They're going to be very angry now," Marcus said with dark humor. "Good thing humans are experts at making enemies angry." In the cramped maintenance tunnel, moving toward an uncertain destination with an impossible ally, Zareth began to understand something important. The galaxy had been told that humans were extinct because they were too dangerous to exist. But dangerous to who? Part 3. The Running Battle. The maintenance tunnels were barely wide enough for Marcus and Zareth to crawl through. The human moved ahead, checking each junction with a small mirror before proceeding. Behind them, the sounds of angry devourers echoed through the station's main corridors. "They can't follow us here," Marcus said quietly, pausing at an intersection. "Too big, but they'll try to get ahead of us and cut us off." Zareth was amazed at how calmly he moved through this nightmare. Her own people were supposed to be expert scouts, but Marcus navigated the twisted station like he had built it himself. Every few meters he would stop and make small marks on the walls with a piece of chalk. "What are those for?" she whispered. "Breadcrumbs," Marcus replied, "so I don't get lost." Humans learned long ago that even the best memory can fail under stress. They crawled for 20 minutes before Marcus held up his hand for silence. Through the thin metal walls they could hear scratching sounds. The devourers were trying to tear through the maintenance shafts. Marcus pulled another small device from his belt. This one looked like a metal box with wires attached. "Proximity mine," he explained softly. "When they break through, this will give them a surprise." He attached the device to the tunnel wall and activated it with a few button presses. A tiny red light began blinking slowly. "How many of those do you have?" Zareth asked. "Enough," Marcus said with a grim smile. "Humans learned to make the best weapons out of the worst materials. We had to. Everyone else in the galaxy had better technology than us." They continued crawling. Behind them, the scratching sounds grew louder. Then there was a sudden explosion, followed by an inhuman shriek of pain and anger. "One down," Marcus said with satisfaction. But the explosion had also damaged the tunnel. The walls groaned and began to buckle. Marcus quickly led them to a vertical shaft that connected to the station's power distribution center. "Up," he said. "Fast." They climbed using the maintenance ladder. Zareth's forearms gave her an advantage here, but she was still weak from her injuries. Marcus stayed below her, ready to catch her if she fell. The power center was a maze of cables and generators. Most of the equipment was dead, but some backup systems were still running. The air hummed with electricity, and warning lights flashed in random patterns. Marcus studied a wall-mounted schematic of the station. "We're here," he said, pointing to a section marked in alien script. "My ship is docked here." He indicated a spot that looked impossibly far away. "That's through the central hub," Zareth said. "The Devourers have turned that whole area into a nest." "Then we go around," Marcus said simply. He traced an alternate route with his finger. "Through the industrial section, across the cargo transfer bridge, and down through the docking bay maintenance areas. That route is 3 times longer. And it goes through sections that might not have atmosphere." Marcus patted a bulky device attached to his belt. "Personal air supply. Good for 6 hours." He looked at her seriously. "Do you have environmental protection?" Zareth touched her own emergency gear. 2 hours, maybe 3 if I'm careful with my breathing. Then we better move fast." As they prepared to leave the power center, the lights suddenly went out. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in red light. But in that brief moment of darkness, they both heard something that made their blood freeze. The wet chittering sounds were coming from inside the walls around them. "They're in the power conduits," Marcus said grimly. "Smart. They're using the station's infrastructure to move around us." Sparks flew from a nearby electrical panel. Something large was moving behind it, tearing through cables and circuits. The Devourers weren't just hunting them anymore. They were actively destroying the station's remaining systems. "Why would they do that?" Zareth asked. Marcus checked his weapon and frowned. "Because they're not just animals. They're intelligent, and they're planning something." A section of wall bulged outward, then tore open. A medium-sized Devourer squeezed through, its body adapting to fit the opening. This one looked different from the others. Sleeker, with more organic components and fewer metal growths. "Scout variant," Marcus muttered. "They're adapting." The creature spotted them and let out a piercing call. Within seconds, answering calls echoed from all around the power center. Marcus grabbed a thick power cable and yanked it loose from its housing. Electricity arced between the exposed ends, throwing wild shadows on the walls. "Zareth, get to that door," he ordered, pointing to an exit on the far side of the room. "When I say run, don't look back." The Scout Devourer crept closer, its multiple eyes reflecting the electrical display. It was being cautious. It had learned to fear the humans' weapons. More bulges appeared in the walls as other creatures prepared to break through. Marcus backed toward a large transformer unit, the live cable still sparking in his hands. "Now!" he shouted. Zareth ran as Marcus jammed the cable into the transformer. The entire power center exploded in a shower of sparks and electrical fire. The lights went out completely as the station's remaining power grid overloaded. In the darkness, she heard Marcus running behind her. They burst through the exit door together just as the power center erupted in flames behind them. "That should slow them down," Marcus said, breathing hard. "But it also means we're running on emergency power only. No life support, no artificial gravity in some sections." They were in an industrial corridor lined with manufacturing equipment. Strange alien machines sat silent and dark, waiting for power that would never come. The air was already getting thinner. Marcus activated a small flashlight and checked his scanner. "Atmosphere is dropping. We need to reach a sealed section within an hour." They moved quickly through the industrial maze. Marcus seemed to know exactly where he was going, but Zareth was completely lost. The station's layout made no sense to her, but the human navigated it like he had studied the blueprints. "How do you know this place so well?" she asked. "I've been watching it for weeks," Marcus replied, "mapping it, learning its patterns. I knew something was wrong here, but I needed proof before I could act." "Watching it? From where?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Humans are very good at hiding. We've had 200 years of practice." They reached what Marcus called the cargo transfer bridge, a narrow walkway suspended over a vast empty space. Below them, the station's cargo hold stretched into darkness. Above them, massive loading cranes hung like sleeping monsters. Halfway across the bridge, they heard the sound they had been dreading, the wet scraping of claws on metal. The Devourers had found another way around. "They're above us," Zareth whispered, looking up at the crane assembly. "And below us," Marcus added, shining his light downward. Glowing eyes reflected back from the cargo holds. "And behind us," said a new voice. They turned to see 3 large Devourers blocking the way they had come. These were different from the others. Older, more evolved. They moved with disturbing intelligence, positioning themselves to cut off all escape routes. Marcus assessed their situation quickly. "The bridge can't support much weight. If too many of them get on it at once, it'll collapse," Zareth finished. "Exactly." Marcus pulled out his last grenade. "But that might work in our favor." One of the large Devourers stepped onto the bridge. The metal walkway groaned under its weight. The creature moved carefully, testing each step. Marcus waited until it was almost within reach, then rolled the grenade toward it. But instead of exploding immediately, the device just sat there, beeping softly. "Timer," Marcus explained. 15 seconds. The Devourer looked down at the strange object, confused. It had never seen a delayed explosive before. "Run," Marcus said quietly. They sprinted toward the other end of the bridge. Behind them, the Devourer tried to follow, but its weight made the walkway sway dangerously. The other creatures hesitated, sensing the instability. The grenade exploded just as Marcus and Zareth reached solid ground. The blast tore through the bridge support, sending the walkway and the Devourer plummeting into the darkness below. But their victory was short-lived. The explosion had also damaged the station's structural supports. The entire section began to shake and groan. "The station is falling apart," Zareth said, feeling the floor vibrate under her feet. Marcus checked his scanner again. "Worse than that. Something big is waking up. The energy from all these explosions is activating something in the station's core." As if in response to his words, a deep thrumming sound echoed through the station. It was like a heartbeat, but impossibly large. "The vibrations made their teeth ache. What is that?" Zareth asked. Marcus looked grim. "I think we just woke up the Queen." Part 4. The Queen's Gambit. The thrumming sound grew louder and the station began to change around them. Metal walls shifted and flowed like liquid. Corridors that had been straight suddenly curved in impossible directions. The floor beneath their feet rippled and reformed, creating new passages that led deeper into the station's heart. "This isn't a space station," Marcus said, watching a wall panel melt and reshape itself. "It's a ship. A living ship." Zareth stared in horror as the truth became clear. The Queen isn't just hiding in the station. She is the station. The deep thrumming was a heartbeat, the pulse of something massive beyond imagination. With each beat, more of the station's metal structure transformed into organic material. Cables became veins carrying glowing fluid through the walls. Air vents turned into breathing holes that wheezed with each pulse. "We have to reach my ship," Marcus said urgently. "If this thing fully awakens, it'll trap us inside its body." But as they tried to move forward, the corridor ahead sealed itself shut. New passages opened to their left and right, but both led deeper into the station instead of toward the docking bays. "She's hurting us," Zareth realized. "The Queen wants us to come to her." Marcus studied his scanner, but the readings made no sense anymore. The station's layout was changing too fast for his instruments to track. "Then we give her what she wants," he said grimly, "but not the way she expects." He pulled out a different device, something Zareth hadn't seen before. It looked like a medical injector, but larger and more complex. "What is that?" she asked. "Insurance," Marcus replied. "Humans have dealt with parasites before. On our world, we learned that sometimes the best way to kill something big is from the inside." The corridor walls around them pulsed with the Queen's heartbeat. The organic growths were spreading faster now, consuming the remaining metal structures. Soon there would be nothing left of the original station. They had no choice but to follow the path the Queen was creating for them. The passages led steadily downward, toward what had once been the station's core. With each step, the walls became more organic and less mechanical. "Marcus," Zareth said quietly, "my people tried to study creatures like this before." The research team disappeared. The entire research station was found empty, drifting in space. "What happened to them?" "We think they were absorbed, consumed and integrated into the creature's consciousness. Their knowledge, their memories, everything became part of the hive mind." Marcus nodded grimly. "That's why the Devourers knew your tactics. They have your teammates' memories." The realization hit Zareth like a physical blow. Kexith and Mullix weren't just dead. They were still alive somewhere inside this nightmare. Their minds trapped in an alien consciousness. "We have to free them," she said. "We can't," Marcus replied gently, "but we can make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." They reached a vast chamber that had once been the station's central hub. Now it was something else entirely. A cathedral of flesh and metal, with veins of glowing fluid running through organic walls that breathed with slow, steady rhythm. And at the center, the Queen waited. She was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Larger than Marcus's entire ship, she resembled a massive flower made of living metal and flesh. Thousands of smaller Devourers clung to her body like petals, connected by organic cables that pulsed with shared consciousness. Her voice filled the chamber, not heard but felt, vibrating through their bones and into their minds. "Welcome, little ones. I have been waiting for you." The voice carried traces of other minds, fragments of every being the Queen had ever consumed. Zareth could hear echoes of her teammates and dozens of other species she didn't recognize. "You are different," the Queen continued, focusing on Marcus. "Your species is not in my memory. Show me what you are." Smaller Devourers began to surround them, but they didn't attack. They were curious, studying Marcus like he was a puzzle they couldn't solve. "I'm human," Marcus said calmly, "and we're very good at solving problems." "Humans." The Queen's voice carried surprise and interest. "I thought your species was extinct. The galactic records say you destroyed yourselves centuries ago." "We got better," Marcus replied. The Queen laughed, and the sound made the entire chamber shake. "Clever. Show me your cleverness, human. Let me taste your thoughts. More devourers moved closer. Zareth raised her weapon, but Marcus put a hand on her arm. Wait, he whispered. Then louder, I'll make you a deal. Take me, but let her go. One human mind should be worth a dozen of any other species. Marcus, no, Zareth protested, but the queen was intrigued. What makes human thought so valuable? We're survivors, Marcus said. We fought wars against impossible odds and won. We've turned barren planets into gardens, and we've learned to thrive in places that would kill any other species. We adapt to anything, overcome everything. The queen considered this. Around the chamber, thousands of smaller devourers swayed with her thoughts. Yes, she said finally. I can feel the truth in your words. Your mind will be a welcome addition to our collective. Tendrils of organic metal began to extend toward Marcus, but as they reached for him, he smiled. There's just one thing you should know about humans, he said, pulling out the device he had shown Zareth earlier. We're very, very good at lying. He jammed the injector into the nearest tendril and pressed the trigger. The queen's scream shook the entire station. The device hadn't been a weapon. It was a delivery system. Whatever Marcus had injected was spreading through the queen's body like fire, turning her organic systems against themselves. Poison? Zareth asked. Better, Marcus said, reloading his weapon as the smaller devourers began to panic. Virus, specifically designed to attack their cellular structure. It'll spread through the entire collective in minutes. The queen thrashed in agony, her massive body convulsing. The smaller devourers connected to her began to collapse as the virus reached them through their shared connection. But she wasn't finished yet. If I die, you die with me, the queen snarled. The chamber walls began to close in, trying to crush them. At the same time, a new sound filled the air, a high-pitched whine that grew louder by the second. She's overloading her power core, Marcus realized. She's going to take the whole station with her. The organic walls were contracting rapidly now, trying to trap them in the chamber. But Marcus was already moving, pulling Zareth toward what looked like a solid wall. Trust me, he said, and fired his shotgun at point-blank range. The organic material was tougher than metal, but it was also alive. The kinetic impact damaged its cellular structure enough for them to break through into the passage beyond. They ran through corridors that were collapsing behind them. The queen's death throes were tearing the station apart. Walls melted, floors buckled, and the ceiling rained down chunks of dying tissue. How far to your ship? Zareth gasped. Too far, Marcus admitted. But I have a backup plan. He led her to what had once been an escape pod bay. Most of the pods were gone or damaged, but one remained intact. It was small, barely big enough for 2 people, but it was their only hope. As they climbed inside, the station shuddered with a massive explosion. The queen's power core was beginning to fail. Will this reach your ship? Zareth asked. Marcus sealed the pod's hatch and began the launch sequence. No, but it'll get us far enough away to survive the explosion. And then, he smiled grimly, then we wait for your people to arrive. My people? Your emergency beacon. I've been boosting the signal since I found you. Your fleet should be here any minute. The escape pod launched just as the station began to tear itself apart. Through the small viewport, they watched the massive organic ship convulse and die. The virus Marcus had created was consuming it from within, turning the queen's own body against her. But as they drifted away from the dying station, Zareth saw something that filled her with new dread. Marcus, she said quietly, look, in the distance the sleek ships of the Veltari fleet were approaching, but they weren't coming to rescue survivors. They were coming to destroy everything, including any witnesses to what they might find. Your people don't want anyone to know humans still exist, Zareth realized. Marcus nodded grimly. Now you understand why we let the galaxy think we were extinct. Some secrets are too dangerous to share. The question now was, would either of them live long enough to keep that secret? Part 5, The Choice. The escape pod drifted in space, its small engines barely functioning. Through the viewport, Marcus and Zareth watched the Veltari fleet approach in perfect formation. 12 sleek warships, their hulls gleaming with the blue-white glow of advanced shielding technology. Battle formation, Zareth said quietly, recognizing the pattern. They're not coming to investigate. They're coming to sterilize the area. Marcus checked the pod systems. Life support was holding, but their communications array was damaged. They couldn't contact the fleet even if they wanted to. How long do we have? He asked. Maybe 20 minutes before they reach firing range. Standard procedure is to destroy everything within a 5-kilometer radius, then scan for survivors. And if they find survivors? Zarath didn't answer immediately. She was thinking about her training, about the classified briefings she had received before this mission. Depends on what the survivors have seen. Behind them, the dying station continued to collapse. The Queen's massive body was dissolving into space, her organic components breaking down as Marcus's virus consumed her from within. Smaller devourers floated dead in the debris field, their shared consciousness finally silenced, but the approaching fleet didn't know the threat was already ended. They only knew that a Veltari exploration team had gone missing, and their emergency beacon had activated. They'll assume we were all killed, Zarath said, unless they scan the pod and find 2 life signs instead of 1, Marcus finished. Then they'll want to know who the extra person is. Marcus was already working on the pod systems, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. He pulled panels off the walls and began rewiring the life support sensors. What are you doing? Zarath asked, hiding my biosignature. If they scan us, they'll only see 1 life form. You. As far as your fleet knows, you're the sole survivor of a devourer attack. But where will you be? Marcus smiled grimly. Officially? Dead. The pod's computers will show that a second survivor died during the escape. Life support failure, injuries too severe to treat. It happens all the time. Zarath watched him work, understanding what he was really asking. You want me to lie to my own people? I want you to survive. And I want humans to remain extinct in the galaxy's records. Why? The question had been burning in her mind since their first meeting. Why hide? Your technology isn't primitive at all. You could help the galaxy fight threats like this. Marcus paused in his work. Because the galaxy doesn't want our help. They want our weapons, our tactics, our knowledge of warfare, but they don't want us. He activated a small display screen and showed her files he had hidden in the pod's computer. Historical records, diplomatic communications, military reports, all dating from before humanity's supposed extinction. 200 years ago, humans were part of the Galactic Council, Marcus explained. We contributed to science, exploration, peacekeeping, but we were also the best soldiers the galaxy had ever seen. When conflicts arose, everyone turned to humans to fight their battles. The records painted a disturbing picture. Humans had been used as mercenaries, shock troops, and expendable warriors in dozens of conflicts. Their adaptability and tactical genius made them invaluable, but it also made them feared. The other species began to worry. Marcus continued. What would happen if humans ever turned their military skills against the galaxy itself? So they made a choice. Zarath read the final documents with growing horror. The destruction of Earth hadn't been an accident or a natural disaster. It had been a coordinated attack by the Galactic Council, designed to eliminate the human threat once and for all. They murdered your entire species, she whispered. They tried to, but humans are very hard to kill completely. Some of us were off-world when it happened. Others had been secretly preparing for this possibility. Humans are paranoid by nature, and we saw the signs. How many of you survived? Enough. We scattered to hidden colonies, dead systems, places the galaxy had forgotten about. We've been rebuilding for 2 centuries, staying hidden, watching. The Veltari fleet was getting closer. Their lead ship was already extending scanner arrays, probing the debris field for signs of life. We could reveal the truth, Zarath said suddenly. I could tell my people what really happened here. Show them that humans saved me, that you're not the monsters they believe you to be. Marcus finished his modifications and sealed the access panels. And then what? Even if your people believe you, the Council will never accept living humans. We're too dangerous to their power structure. Then we change the power structure. With what army? The galaxy has billions of beings across thousands of worlds. Humans number in the thousands now, maybe tens of thousands. We can't fight them all. Zarath was quiet for a moment, thinking. But you could inspire them. Other species who are tired of the Council's control. Worlds that want real change. Humans could be a symbol of resistance. Or we could be exterminated completely this time. Marcus activated the pod's beacon. The choice is yours, Zarath. You can tell your people the truth and risk everything, or you can help us stay hidden and live to fight another day. The lead Veltari ship was close enough now that they could see its weapon ports opening. Standard procedure. Destroy first, ask questions later. But then the ship's scanners found the escape pod and the weapons powered down. "They're signaling us," Marcus said, monitoring the communications array. "Standard rescue protocol." A voice crackled over the comm system, speaking in Veltari. "This is Fleet Commander Thexel to Escape Pod 77 Alpha. Identify yourself." Zareth looked at Marcus one last time. He had saved her life, shown her truths that challenged everything she believed about the galaxy, but he was also asking her to betray her own people, to keep secrets that could change the course of history. She activated the comm system. "This is Scout Zareth, survivor of Exploration Team Delta 9. I am the only survivor." Marcus nodded approvingly, but Zareth wasn't finished. "Commander, I need to report unusual readings from the station before it was destroyed. There may be more threats in this sector that require investigation." Marcus looked at her sharply. "That wasn't part of the plan." "Understood, Scout. We're bringing you aboard for full debriefing. Prepare for tractor beam." As the Veltari ship's tractor beam locked onto their pod, Zareth turned to Marcus. "I won't reveal humans directly," she said quietly. "But I'm going to plant seeds. Questions that will make my people think, investigate, maybe eventually discover the truth on their own. That's dangerous for both of us." "Yes, but it's also hope." She smiled, the first real smile she had managed since this nightmare began. "You saved my life, Marcus. You showed me that the galaxy's greatest enemies might actually be its greatest allies. That truth deserves a chance to grow." The pod was drawn into the Veltari ship's docking bay. Through the viewport, they could see armed soldiers waiting. Standard procedure when retrieving survivors from unknown threats. "What will you tell them about the station?" Marcus asked. "That it was consumed by an unknown biological weapon, that the threat was eliminated by some kind of internal breakdown, possibly a virus, that we need to study these creatures more carefully before we encounter them again." "And about humans?" Zareth was quiet for a moment. "I'll tell them that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places, that the galaxy might not be as empty of hope as we thought." The docking bay pressurized and the pod's hatch began to cycle. Marcus activated his disguise field, a piece of human technology that would make him invisible to most scanners and visual detection. "Will I see you again?" Zareth asked. "Probably not. Humans are very good at staying hidden. But you'll be watching?" Marcus smiled. "We're always watching. And if the galaxy ever faces another threat like the Devourers, we'll be ready to help, even if they never know we're there." The hatch opened, and Veltari soldiers entered with medical equipment and weapons. They found only Zareth, weak but alive, the sole survivor of a terrible encounter. As they carried her toward the medical bay, she looked back once at the empty pod. Marcus was gone, as if he had never existed at all, but she carried his gift with her: knowledge, hope, and the understanding that sometimes the greatest heroism came not from those who claimed credit, but from those who worked in shadows to protect a galaxy that had forgotten how to protect itself. In her official report, Scout Zareth would describe the Devourer attack, the station's transformation, and the mysterious virus that had saved her life. She would recommend increased research into biological threats and better cooperation between species. She would not mention humans. But in the classified sections available only to the highest levels of Veltari Command, she would note something interesting: evidence of advanced tactical thinking in the station's destruction, the work of an intelligence that understood both biological warfare and sacrifice. Someone or something had been watching over her in those final moments. Someone who might still be out there, waiting for the galaxy to be ready for their return. The seed was planted. Now it only needed time to grow.